everybody's seen it, but we've got a lot of people for comments.
So we actually have Craig Armstrong on the phone for contracting.
Okay.
I would like to just, after you dispense with NERC, of course, if we don't mind, let's go ahead and
Do that
get
first.
our questions out of the way. That way he can hop off.
Okay.
All right.
So let's start with the contracting process.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions relative to the presentation we had at the full board? Nobody has a question?
And that's okay. You may not.
It was a really good presentation, so it was very clear. I actually understood the contracting process, so that was good. Anyway, thank you for being on.
Thanks, Craig. I'm super glad I told him about the call. Don't forget Kim's update as well, too.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Kim? Yes, please.
Good afternoon, I'm Kim Raff. I work with the Department of Energy, and I am new to my role taking over Zach Todd's liaison function for the committee. Tonight I wanted to try to give you an update, try to keep it as straightforward as possible. Where we are in the budget cycle, right now the 2020 budget cycle is underway. The President's budget request was submitted. The House voted on their mark, and the Senate should be providing theirs soon. We're waiting on that. To recap the numbers that Zach went over with you last time, the President's budget request was $75 million more than the FY19 enacted. The House mark, when they put it forward, they reduced the Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative by $47 million. They increased nuclear material PBS 11C by $20 million, and they increased PBS 30 soil and groundwater by $5 million. So that was their position going in. Both the President's budget request and the House mark put a high priority on the liquid waste program, and neither one of them addressed the payment in lieu of taxes. So we still have one more bite of the apple when the Senate provides their mark, and then they'll be doing some committee meetings, conferences back and forth to try to resolve and come up with a final number, hopefully before October 1st when the new fiscal year starts. For the 21 budget, the President's budget request was drafted and submitted to EM. We're still waiting on the final targets, and then we'll adjust accordingly and provide that final submittal. So that process is underway. As of right now, the liquid waste program still remains the high priority for EM in the 21 budget. We did see, I read in the news that there was a budget deal between the current administration and lawmakers which lifted spending caps, raised the debt ceiling, and they're hoping that combined with some other deals that they had made will allow them to either minimize or avoid continuing resolution. That's a big deal for us, so we can get to work right away, and we're hoping that will go through. Military update. Zach's going to be providing more information on that, but I did want to let you know that next week we have the South Carolina Attorney General's office coming to meet with the lawyers and some of the folks from DOE to talk about finalizing an overarching document to allow them to begin working in those training areas on site to codify their use of the site. Land use. There was a recommendation from the CAB previously regarding using solar power at Savannah River site, and we have had some forward momentum on that. Dominion Energy has renewed their interest in partnering with the department to provide some solar power initiatives, and so the department has formed an integrated project team to look into that and to try to set a path forward so we can begin down that road. So there was some positive momentum there. And then last week, Ike White, who is our new EM1, visited the Savannah River site. He was very positive about the work that the Savannah River site does, the safety record we have, and the strong relationship we have with our stakeholders. And he parlayed that into opportunities in the future to be able to get the site accelerating, get some work done. We did receive a call from headquarters regarding renewed activity related to the strategic plan that's been sitting dormant for a while. They sent something saying, here it is, update it, we need to get it out of here quickly. So hopefully we'll see something soon on that, so stay tuned. That's all I have.
All right, good. Thanks, Kim. Appreciate it. And welcome to being the new relation.
Thank you.
We're going to miss old Zach, but you're a better choice.
I didn't want to go too far.
So the next thing on the agenda, we'll talk about the recommend. Sure. Gil?
What's the number on the applied research, the collaborative?
reduced by
Don't forget the
47
microphones,
million.
guys.
Reduced by how much?
It was reduced by 47 million.
And what did the number come back at?
It was 50, it was reduced by 47, so it's like 2.89.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks. So moving to the next item, we had written a recommendation on the NERP and some things that would help maintain the NERP into the future. And the NERP is critical to the long-term strategic legacy management of the site. So we gave this recommendation to DOE and they gave us back, I felt, very favorable response. And I just wonder if anybody has any comments on the DOE response. I mailed it to everybody so you could read it. Okay, just check. I'm looking for hit nods. Okay. You have a question? Okay. Yes?
This is James Linsky. Yeah, I also read it very favorably. I didn't have any additional feedback on it.
Okay, good. So do I hear a motion to take this to the full board and close it?
I make the motion.
Narendra moves. Got a second? All in favor?
Yeah.
It was unanimous. Now, moving forward to the relationship with the South Carolina National Guard, and Joyce and Doug and Dan had written a recommendation and gave us all the draft. And Zach is here because when I heard his slides before, I had several questions. So if everybody's okay with it, I'm going to ask Zach to talk first about what kind of document it would be that we would, DOE and the group would sign, and what would be the rules and regulations.
All right, say that last part again for me.
So there, in your presentation, there are a whole bunch of things that would be considered in the agreement. No interference site operations, de minimis cost, SRS, military responsible training activities, and protect site environment. And you said that would all be in this agreement.
Yeah, so for Zach Todd, DOE. So I don't necessarily mean like formally in the agreement, but it's understood that they'd have to play by our rules. So, I mean, that's kind of like the outside of the agreement type structure. There will be references saying, hey, you have to comply with all DOE, we'll just say rules to keep it simple, and things like that. They'll have to abide by a lot of the things that we do on the site, our policies. But that's not necessarily something that's going to be in the formal agreement.
Okay.
Most of that stuff was just kind of background information to get the recommendation.
All right. And you said you had some comments.
I do. So has everyone gotten a chance to read the recommendation for the military? Okay, great. So I'm just going to be very frank, and my boss is behind me, so he can tell me whether he'll roll me back in if need be and stuff. So with things with recommendation, again, I can't tell you what to recommend, but I can give you some thoughts. Just kind of moving down the recommendation list, continue and expand military training activities to the mutual benefit of both the site and the military. So our position has been pretty clear. It's not that we don't want to be involved, but we're not going to create a program or develop these. We're going to put that on the military to do, and if it doesn't interfere with our operations, we'll allow it. Is kind of how the relationship will work. So that kind of brings it down to the second one. The program should establish an official program to support these activities. We do support and oversee the military activities, but there's not going to my knowledge, be an official program that stood up to support these and facilitate these. This is again where it's critical for us to have that single point of contact, that liaison, if you will, with the South Carolina National Guard has been functioning because of all the different considerations at the site. And that's why we're trying to point it in that direction. So just to be very, very, very clear, the way that I would word a recommendation is that South Carolina National Guard be the single facilitator for military training at Savannah River site. is how I would word the recommendation. So it kind of talks about the city, state, federal law enforcement agencies. We most likely we would not accept that, because at that point you're infringing on a lot of things that the national lab does, and the military is not going to get purview over what the national lab does. So that's what I'd keep it, that very, very simple recommendation, because a lot of this other stuff we just wouldn't support at this time. So now what makes that critical is like what you put in the background. And Savannah Riverside, it's a very unique training opportunity and a very unique training venue, especially for the military. So there's a lot of considerations. We have a K area, and the day that the military, that consideration is forgot and the military starts trying to train on that would be kind of like the worst day ever type scenario. And if we have Navy units and we have Air Force units and Army units that don't understand the training environment at Savannah Riverside like the South Carolina National Guard does, that's where you kind of potentially run into some of these type issues. So for us, we want all training coordinated underneath the South Carolina National Guard, because they make the most natural sense. They have the 750 acres permitted to them. They've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. They have a full-time employee at the site. They understand Savannah Riverside. In fact, most of the folks in their units, or a lot of folks in their units, are actually Savannah Riverside employees. They get it. Some of these outside units, they don't understand what we have. Kind of looking back, if it's my own experience in the military, training at Savannah Riverside, you kind of have this like alpha mentality. Oh, okay, we know what we're doing. And the reality is, the most of the military, they do not understand Savannah Riverside. They just do not get it. They don't understand the training considerations. That's why it's critical to have that single point of contact, a single facilitator. And all that background needs to kind of like highlight the complexities of training at Savannah Riverside. It can be done safely, it can be done very effectively, but you have to have somebody that understands it. And when you're having new people come in on board and you have to educate them every single time, it gets burdensome, and that's what the DOE's position is.
Okay.
Or I would imagine DOE's position is.
I concur with that. All right, that's good to know. I knew that in the full board meeting that Thomas Johnson seemed to have some sensitivity about specific words, and I can understand the difference. Having worked in the lab and understand what the lab did, and it really wasn't this. They were helping all kinds of other agencies. So making it the single point coordinator for military activities makes a lot of sense. And then in your talk, you had mentioned that there would in the future potentially be some facilities like a barracks. And is that something that
I wouldn't address in this letter.
Okay, but is that something that would be a National Guard structure?
So, I guess it depends how you look at it. The South Carolina National Guard would be on their permitted land, but you start getting into this federal funding type versus state funding, and not to get too technical with it, but it be federally funded, but the South Carolina National Guard would run it. So
but this is in the future to be determined, right?
Right. All that stuff's to be determined.
Okay.
And the South Carolina National Guard would be the folks running and providing the maintenance and utilizing the buildings primarily.
So, and I'd ask you before we started the meeting, the process, and I think you alluded to the fact that you said the Attorney General's kind of come down and talk to the site legal folks.
That's right.
And so that's how the process is going to start.
So
that's why I think we just need to know what the process is.
Yeah. So the context of this letter, the why, right? So several years ago, actually at Fort Gordon and Savannah Riverside kind of agreed to facilitate this training together. And Fort Gordon left, Savannah and South Carolina National Guard raised their hand. They were like, hey, we want this to be us. So we haven't had all that official documentation and memorandums of understanding. Interagency agreement is between the Department of Army and funnels down to the Fort Gordon side. Now we've utilized that, but it's kind of a band-aid, and we need to get that officially recognized on the military side for South Carolina National Guard. So that's the issue South Carolina National Guard is having, is getting that formal recognition on the military side. And that's, in my opinion, some like inter-branch squabbling, having a National Guard unit in charge of a Navy unit. You kind of get into those like I'm bigger than you are type conversations, and it's just at a very high level. So what this letter is doing is this. One, when this letter is written, it voices the community's support for the South Carolina National Guard as a single facilitator for military training at Savannah River sites due to all the complexities and things like that you put in the background, right? And I give that letter to Savannah or South Carolina National Guard. Hey, you have the community's support. Go show your bosses, right? And then DOE responds to that recommendation to either accept or deny. And if we accept, look, you have Savannah River sites DOE support as well to be the single facilitator of all military training at Savannah River site. So they can take that to their bosses, they can take that to their meetings and say, hey, look, we have the community support for this, and we have South Carolina, or we have Savannah River sites DOE support for this. That's the mindset. It gives them those two documents that they can take forward and hopefully move the process along.
Okay, so we could rewrite this recommendation and make it simpler but very direct.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, are there any other comments on the recommendation?
Mac, this is Dan online.
Okay, Dan?
So, hearing what you said, would it be better to rewrite number 2 to have D as being the primary, South Carolina National Guard, point of contact, blah, 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 and then A, programs should include military, so basically putting the onus on the National Guard to have the program and to establish an official program to support the activity. Is that kind of more along the lines you're looking?
Yeah, so for my goals with this letter would be primarily to be, I don't really care about anything else as far as the recommendations in here. Now, if you guys have like thoughts and recommendations that you want to put forward, that's something that you can obviously do. That's within your purview. But the only thing in this letter that matters for me and what I'm trying to do is to be. Everything else is kind of noise.
Okay, that makes sense. And Dan, I don't know if you heard him say that we also shouldn't include the law enforcement and other agencies. This would be just military through the Guard. I don't know if you caught that or not.
And I actually didn't catch that. The microphone is picking up a lot of people today. That's fine with me. I actually didn't add that.
Okay. So Dan, you're one of the originators. Who will rewrite this?
Actually, Doug wrote it for us.
Okay.
Most of it was Joyce's recommendation, and the number 3 was actually one of the thoughts I had had. So we met with the staff to kind of go over a few things with regards to the presentation, and then we took some notes, and this is what we had crafted. But yeah, if number 2 is stronger by establishing B, actually if you just switch 2 and B and 2B, that probably gets that point across reasonably well. I still feel that DOE could look at the ongoing success and what we've done in the past and what they're doing today, and more or less at least make an attempt to advertise it, because if DOE may not be so much interested in expending resources on it, but the public certainly would like to have the enjoyment of 2 agencies using the same land.
I think Zach addressed that would be a Guard operation, not DOE.
Right. We got to remember what our mission here is. The mission is cleaning up the site, not growing the site for military training activities. So we got to make sure that EM is focused on what our mission is, cleaning up the site. So I'm not sure we want to get into EM's mission is going out and advertising the site to do military training exercises. That's really the job of the South Carolina National Guard.
Actually cleaning up.
I'm sorry?
A lot of that training was actually cleaning up and doing useful work on the site, and that's kind of where, if you put a memo together that describes it, they get out of the cheerleading aspect of it and say, hey, we can benefit of this too. It would be great to get other agencies involved.
Yeah, so that's a very limited subset of the training. If we're putting a percentage on it, that's probably less than 1 or 2% of the training. But it is, you're absolutely right. That is absolutely one of the successes we've had for the military training, and it's a reason why we'd want to continue it. So no argument there, and that's in DOE's best interest to do and facilitate those type of trainings, just because of it gets worked on in the fiscal savings and things of that nature. But
Would it be best to maybe add something to highlight the mutually beneficial projects or something along that line to make that, so obviously someone did know the history of it, and then, to someone just reading it, it sounds like the Department of Energy is getting into the doing and use act of some sort, and, where that's great, but really the EM projects that the other branches of the forces actually helped us. That's kind of more my interest.
right, and this is kind of where my intent and your all's recommendations may not align. For me, we're going to continue to do that on some level. The South Carolina National Guard, we're not going to go out there and do mass advertisements or things of that nature. We've put together different books and stuff that kind of highlight some of these projects that can help the National Guard do some of these projects, but we're just never going to get into the business of like mass advertising or trying to go down there.
So there's really two different things. We've kind of mixed them up. The National Guard does its own training, which they've done with you as civil engineering projects. But really what you're talking about now is having the National Guard take over as the single point of coordination for all the military services that might want to come here.
Well, they've been doing that, and they've been doing both those roles.
Okay, but I'm saying they're two separate things.
Right, and I don't know if I'd muddle this, my personal opinion, because again, I'm wanting to send this letter to the South Carolina National Guard that they send to their headquarters. I don't know if I would, I don't know if I'd muddle that. To me, if you would want to do a separate recommendation, that would help us out, I think, a little bit more, just because we want to forward this on to South Carolina National Guard's headquarters and such.
So Dan, maybe we could form two recommendations. Hey Dan, did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Okay, so maybe we can.
I'm just understanding why you can't have a 1, 2, and a 3.
You absolutely can. I'm just saying, for my purposes, we're probably the mission of EM is not to grow and expand this military training. So those are our positions. And for what we need for this Department of Energy, Savannah River, what we need is to help the South Carolina National Guard with some of their hurdles. The only thing that I care about here, this is my personal thing, is 2B. Now, if you put other stuff in there, sure. I think it just muddles the point. My 2 cents.
Okay. And I actually agree with Zach. I like it being nice and focused. And maybe the thing that isn't clear to everybody is that the National Laboratory's been doing all kinds of other training for all kinds of other services, which is disconnected from this. And they've been doing it for 10 years. And they continue to do it. And part of it is at the site, and part of it's at other military facilities where the people from the site go at the military facilities and train them. So it's a really complicated thing. So if we want to just get at the National Guard thing, I sort of agree with Zach. We should make it very focused. But that's my 2 cents.
This is Doug Howard.
Yes.
I'm kind of just connected to Colonel the team, so I'm kind of lost in what's going on.
So, Doug, this is Zach. It's kind of like some of our conversations that we've had. It's really the background discussing in the letter of recommendation, the background discussing the complexities of training at the site and the importance of having a single person familiar or a single entity familiar with the site. And then really out of this the recommendations themselves, 2B is the only for again, my 2 cents, from my perspective, 2B is the only one that I really care about. That the South Carolina National Guard be the single facilitator for military training at Savannah River site. I wouldn't include city, state, federal law enforcement agencies, because at that point we would reject this.
Okay, so on the, is that the one recommendation that is going to fly, or what?
I'm sorry, Doug, I didn't hear you.
Is that something you think's gonna fly?
Is that
So I'm here today to help you get this recommendation to fly. And I think I'm being very clear on how I would do it to kind of help it navigate the process. I think John Lopez has echoed that as well. Obviously, you guys can do whatever recommendations you would like, but I've kind of said my piece on how I would phrase this to get our DOE to accept this recommendation. I think there's a previous military recommendation that y'all did a couple years ago, and we actually rejected a couple items in there, if I'm not mistaken, that it kind of went along these other paths. Nothing's changed in those regards. We're not going to set up an official program to support this. We're not going to expend energy and resources to grow this. We need a single facilitator because training at Savannah Riverside is complex. We don't want an oops, because at that point things stop and we don't do military training at Savannah Riverside anymore. So having different entities, new people coming and going, it's a problem for us. So we need one person. South Carolina National Guard is the natural fit with our history to conduct and facilitate this training for all the units that are coming on site.
So let's do this. Tom, why don't we give Zach a break for a minute, see what everybody else around the table thinks about whether or not you want to have just 2B in here, or if you want to add in some other stuff. See what everybody else feels. Maybe we can go around the table if you want.
All right.
Yeah, I'm always in favor of the most simple and direct, and I think that's in here, but there are some embellishments, and wouldn't this be nice or wouldn't that be? A lot of things, if I were the author or responsible, I'd just start lining a lot of stuff out. It's very clear what we want to do, and it's clear that whatever we do should be to the mutual benefit of these organizations, but it should be very clear that someone is in charge and it not be the site really. I would just simplify this. I think everything we need is there. A lot of things, I think it would be better if they were lined out. Otherwise, people will read this and they'll see the thing they want or like, and well, we didn't really mean that. We said, maybe it might, but there are things like that it could misdirect somebody who's looking for something. So that would be my comment. Just go through and just start lining some things out and make this very focused.
Okay, Jim.
Jim Gielkamp. I agree with Zach's approach. I think narrow and focused is the best way to get this to advance. I am concerned that the potential for the politics of the National Guard dictating to the Department of the Army is going to make life a little harder. Would suggest that you might want to, if it doesn't already exist, have an outline of the types of training things that would be okay, and especially those that would not. That might help some too.
Well, I was just going to jump in, Gil Allen's Cap, going off of what Carl said. Doug and Dan are on the phone, right? And they're two of the authors.
Yeah.
So maybe we should start with them. I was just because I wanted to know what their thought was as the authors, because we're talking about crossing things out.
Well, why don't we get all the comments, then they can talk about it because they wrote this.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear what they.
Yeah, that's what I because with them being, I just wondered if they're in agreement. That's all. Before we went around, but that's good.
Bobby Williams, Cap. I agree with what Zach has said, removing city, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. And in 3C, we're repeating what we've already said. In 2B, that the National Guard will be the single point of contact. So C is redundant to 2B. To me, 3C is.
Brandon?
Bob Smith, Cab. I'm very much a KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. I think Zach made it.
I'm the stupid part of that.
Okay. Zach made a good point, and I think the part that they contribute is a relatively minor part, but it is important. But it's also, we don't want it to detract from the mission statement of the DOE. So I think we should focus it on making it National Guard. I think keeping a single point of contact makes absolute sense, because they don't need 3 or 4 different groups coming to them with different recommendations and different requests, and not understanding all the details and having to explain all that information to them. So I think it should be simplified and should be direct and should be focused on making the National Guard the single point of contact. Let them drive it. It's an opportunity for our state, not necessarily an opportunity for the DOE, other than to gain some benefit from it. But overall, at the end, I think the state gains more out of it than the DOE gains out of it in some respects. So I think it would be just make it focused and make it simple.
Narendra Malik, Cap. I strongly believe that there should be one point of contact, and I agree with Zach that it should be National Guard, and their policies and procedures have to be approved by DOE. In case they want to have some local and city law enforcement agencies practice, but they must practice under the rules and regulations established by National Guard if they want to. But it's up to DOE whether they'll give the permission or not. But once again, I agree with Zach, it should be a single point of contact, and that's National Guard. Thanks.
I want to hear what the guys say.
Well, they're going to respond to us by rewriting this proposal.
Is that what they're in agreement with? Are they in agreement with doing that?
Well, I mean, then they can say what they agree with and what they're just getting input from us.
Right. Go ahead. I apologize.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Doug.
Yeah, the reason why I was behind having other services part of the training is, first of all, I don't know, I'm sure that it's classified on how the site would actually be defended and if it had to be defended. But I was looking at the fact that services other than the National Guard were the ones that were responsible for a possible defense of the site in any way, and never given us familiarity with the site itself. With the training grounds they have out there, I think it's enough if they had the choice of wanting to train out there, if they possibly could. And I think when you have real life, I guess, scenarios like Savannah River offers, then I think it should be open to services other than just the National Guard. Now, I do agree with the fact that the National Guard would be the one single gateway or one point of contact for that training, but I was in agreement with the fact that it should be open to other entities. Let's say similar scenarios, if they had to, take action as far as defense or either, whatever it might be. And that was my reason behind, including the other agencies such as the city and.
Can I respond to that real quick?
Yeah.
Were you able to get that?
I was, Doug. This is Zach Todd. So, just a couple thoughts. The way that the recommendation is written is that the military is a single point of contact or a point of reference for military, city, state, federal law enforcement agencies. So it's kind of implying that they're overseeing and facilitating the training. So all those agencies, all those different, city, state, and federal agencies, there's already mechanisms in place that operate outside the military. And there's formal agreements that kind of go into all those types of things. So it's unnecessary in my eyes. And we wouldn't have the military overseeing those already in place relationships, for lack of a better word. So if it stays like that, the language, we would most likely reject it. You have the military overseeing processes that are already in place, and that's not what we're going for here. Now, the defense stuff, I'll say that there has been conversations and stuff like that, but it's not the South Carolina National Guard they're not responsible for the defense of the site. We have mechanisms and processes in place that are for that, and none of that's going to really be. It's just, I don't want to say a non-issue, but it's not something that we'll probably get into depth here about.
So this is Tom French. Doug, I might make one comment, and I think there might be a tiny bit of a misunderstanding. So if the National Guard is the single point of contact, then any military service could come in through them. It's not excluding them or not leaving it only to the National Guard. National Guard just signing up to be the coordinator for anybody that wants to come in. For military. So I think there was a little bit of confusion about who could come and who couldn't.
So this is Dan again. Hey, Heather, hey, James. I sent a slightly revised version of those recommendations just to start wordsmithing, and I think maybe it just pointed it in a better direction for Zach's point. And I just want to say a little something to my peers, because on prior recommendations, we've had two separate recommendations that were completely, well, not completely, but dissimilar in many ways, and we as a CAP have been trying to push them together, and now we have one that we want to tear it apart. So, I'll be Dan here for a second. I just feel we're a little bit helter-skelter on what we do, because sometimes we're trying to mush it all together, and other times we want to keep it simple, stupid. So, I guess I'm a little taken aback by carving this one all up. But anyway, if we take a look, or if we can take a look, I don't know how quickly you guys can pull this up.
Give her just a minute. It's getting to the email. She'll pull it up in just a second.
Taking B as being the primary.
This isn't it. Give her just a second. Pull it.
No, I know I'm going to make a comment about this. We're not going to go off right now.
National Guard do a couple of
Oh,
other
need a
things.
break for public comment.
Well, when it comes up, you guys can tell me what you think.
So Dan, I'm gonna do a process thing. We won't have time to all read it. What would be really good is if you could send James a copy, or James got a copy, and he can email it to us, then we can send comments back to you. We can move this thing forward, and we can discuss it at the full board in September.
No, we won't be able to discuss it.
No, we as a group can discuss it. We can't do it in full session.
Well, it'd be great if
Well-
we got out of the committee somewhat on the same path.
Dan, let's hang on for just a second, because
Hey, Dan, they have to do public comment. Hold on,
we need a break for public comment for just a minute. We're a little bit late behind it. Is anybody from the public that wants to make a comment? Okay, thank you. Sorry, Dan, didn't mean to interrupt you, but I had to do that. Thank you.
Absolutely no problem. Absolutely no problem. I mean, if we could just take a real quick deep sound to make sure that this is kind of the direction we want to go, because it's not perfectly wordsmithed to get the total intent. Just kind of want to see what the committee says, because I certainly don't want 10 more people putting the cart in something wordsmithed.
Why, Dan? That's the funnest part.
I don't think you remember some of the wordsmithing that we
I
went
do.
through maybe
I do.
before you.
I know. I do.
Yeah, let's talk German nuclear fuel then.
All right, let's scroll down. Just the recommendations, because that's the part that you changed, is the recommendation section. So all he really did, or most of what he looks like he did here, was pull out the numbers and put everything as a subsection of number 1, which was the former 2B.
Is that kind of your intent? Focus in on, get them to be one point of contact, and
So let me try to.
So we've got to take out the military and city and state, federal law enforcement. There's a whole bunch of other things going with them all the time. It has nothing to do with this. So we should take that out because it'll draw fire.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine with that. We can do that.
Okay.
And then I think we're pretty much. I mean, I think that's pretty much what you were saying, isn't it, Zach? He's rolling his eyes.
Well,
So let me ask it. Let me ask it this way: as it stands, written like this, or in front of them, you would only be able to. The department, most likely, from your perspective, would only be able to give a partially accept and not an actual full acceptance. Is that yay or nay?
most likely.
Okay, so here's the real trick to this. If the idea of this is to give the department and therefore South Carolina National Guard a document that they can use to show public support and DOE support, do you want to give them a document that says partially accept, or do you want to give them a document that has a chance of saying we accept this recommendation? Which one is going to be more powerful for you? Do you want to convey all of these in one document, or do you want that accept that they're going to be able to use when they're trying to advocate for being the single point of focus through the rest of the military?
I would vote for giving them something that they could actually use to move this forward.
Okay. Here, from my seat, the issue I have, and Zach, I appreciate you and I've talked for years.
Sure.
When we start having conversations with DOE, and Zach, in this situation, you're DOE,
Okay.
and we are writing a recommendation as a Citizens Advisory Board. We write our recommendation, and DOE accepts it, partially accepts it, or rejects it. I feel in this process we've kind of gone a little bit beyond to say what is going to be accepted, what is going to be, so we want to make sure it's written properly. That's not our role here. So we want to write a recommendation that the CAB wants to recommend, and that's the reason I want the authors. What is the author's original intent? And then the committee can wordsmith, or we can vote up, or we can vote down. I feel like in this situation, we may have overstepped a little bit trying to get exactly what will get approved and what won't get approved. So from the chair, from my position as chair, I want recommendations that the CAB wants, not necessarily ones that'll pass. I respect it because I've talked to Zach multiple times offline. What are some of the things we can say, because he was our point of contact. But we have to put recommendations through that we want recommendations on, even if they decline them.
So, no, I agree, but I didn't see this till today. But there's a whole lot in here I objected to because I've been involved in this for a long time. So, I think they should come back with another draft. You're right, we shouldn't wordsmith it here. Kind of hard to do on the phone.
Right, it is. But at the core of, we need to keep the recommendation in, as the recommendation authors write it, and then if the committee, be it whatever committee is, doesn't like it, the committee says no, and go back. And that sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm saying let them go back and put their thoughts in and give us another draft.
Okay.
Gil, just one thought. You're absolutely 100% correct. DOE, we can't tell you what recommendations to include or not to include. But I will say this: we asked for this recommendation for a very specific reason, and in my mind, we want it to be able to use it for that reason.
Oh, I get it.
And if there's just a consideration, if there's any way that we can split out some of these recommendations, I don't know if this is even possible, James. So if maybe what I'm looking for, and then all the other recommendations that you guys want to include, no, not impossible.
Well, that'll be possible if that's the direction the committee chooses to go.
Okay.
We've got about 5 minutes left for this evening.
So if you guys are willing to do another draft, you've gotten more input than you wanted, I'm sure. So if you could write another draft and send it to us so we can read it and feed comments back to you, I think that'd be helpful, so we can move this forward. Dan, does that work for you?
So my intent was that to split it into recommendations, give a letter
a good approach.
Make everything fair.
Yeah, that sounds good, Dan. So you guys are willing to take that on? That's perfect.
Well, 1/3 said
Yeah, we can hear you now.
2/3.
So we'll make sure to get Joyce's voice into it as well.
I don't care that I agree, but I'm good to go.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much. I think it's been a good meeting. We had a little bit late start, but we covered a lot of ground. So, hey, and Dan and Doug and Joyce isn't on the phone, but thank you guys for all your hard work. We appreciate that. It was a good effort. Because I was going to figure out who was going to write this at the meeting tonight, and it's already, we're well on our way. So, appreciate it. Are there any other comments? Then meeting's adjourned.